Hello guys, welcome to once again our YouTube channel TechBird, and today we will cover Azure Data Factory, and it's very important. It's cloud ETL tool, and we will go through some key points of Azure Data Factory from interview point of view. As you know, it's very demanding in market these days. So let's see what it is. So based on cloud, Azure Data Factory is a Microsoft tool that gathers raw business data and subsequently converts it into functional information. Essentially, it is a data integration ETL, extract, transform, and load services responsible for automating the revolution of provided raw data. Let's look at some of the Azure interview questions and answer that help you to prepare for Azure data job interviews. So first point is briefly explain different components of Azure Data Factory. So first component is pipeline. It represents the activity logical container. Second one is dataset. It's a pointer to data utilized in pipeline activities. Third one is mapping data flow. Represented data transformation UI logic. Fourth one is activity. In the data factory pipeline, activity is the execution step that can be utilized for data consumption and transformation. Then trigger. Mention the time of pipeline execution when the type pipeline will run. Linked services. It represents an explanatory connection string for those data sources being used in the pipeline activities. Then control flow. Regulate the execution flow of pipeline activities. Then second point, what is the need for Azure Data Factory? So while going through Azure tutorial, you would come across this terminology. Since data comes from different sources, it can be in any form. Such varied sources will transfer or channelize the particular data in various ways, and the same can be in varied format. Whenever we convey this data on the cloud or specific storage, it is inevitable to ascertain that this data is efficiently managed. So you have to transform the data and remove unnecessary parts. Since data transfer is concerned, it is important to ascertain that data is collected from various sources and conveyed in common place. Now store it, and if needed, transformation needs to be done. The same can be accomplished by conventional data warehouse too, but it comes with some limitations. Occasionally, we are impelled to use custom application that can manage all source process distinctly. But this process consumes time, and integration of all such processes is troublesome. So it is necessary to find an approach to automate this process or design appropriate workflows. Azure Data Factory assists you in coordinating this entire process more conveniently. Third is there any limit on how many integration runtime can be performed? So no, there is no limit on the number of integration runtime occurrences you can have in ADF. However, there is limit on number of VM cores, means virtual machine cores, that the integration runtime can utilize for every subscription for SSIS package implementation. When you pursue Microsoft Azure certification, you should be aware of these terms. Fourth, explain data factory integration runtime. So, integration runtime is a safe computing infrastructure being used by data factory by offering data integration abilities over various network environments. Moreover, it ascertains that such activity will be implemented in the nearest possible area to the data store. If you want to learn Azure step by step, you must be aware of this and other such fundamental Azure terminologies. Fifth one, what is meant by blob storage in Azure? So blob storage in Azure is one of the key aspects to learn if you want to get Azure fundamental certification. Azure blob storage is a service very useful for the storage of massive amounts of unstructured object data like binary data or text. Means it's for binary data or text. Moreover, you can use blob storage to render data to the world or to the save application data confidentially. Typical uses of blob storage include directly serving images or document to a browser. Second, storage of files for distributed access. Third, streaming audio and video. Fourth, storing data for backup and reinstating disaster recovery and archiving. Fifth one is storing data for investigation by an on-premise or any Azure hosted service. Six, mention the steps for creating ETL process in ADF. So when attempting to retrieve some data from Azure SQL Server database, if anything needs to be processed, it will be processed and saved in the data lake store. Here are some steps for creating ETL. Firstly, create a link service. First step, create a link service for data source store like SQL Server database. Suppose that we are using a car dataset. Now create a link service for a destination data store, that is Azure Data Lake Store. After that, create a data set for data saving. Then set up the pipeline and add copy activity. And finally, schedule the pipeline by inserting a trigger. So these are the steps. Seventh, mention three types of trigger that Azure Data Factory supports. So first one is scheduled trigger, as the name specified, useful for execution of EDF pipeline on a wall clock timetable. Second is tumbling window trigger, is useful for execution of EDF pipeline over cyclic interval. It holds on to the pipeline state. And third one is event based trigger, respond to an event that is related to the blob. Example of such event include adding or deleting blob from your Azure storage account, and it will trigger the pipeline. Eighth, how to create Azure function. So Azure function are solution for implementing small lines of function or code in the cloud. With these functions, we can choose preferred programming languages. You need to pay only for the time the code runs, which means that you need to pay per usage. It supports a wide range of programming languages, including App Sharp, C Sharp, Node.js, Java, Python, and PHP. Also, it supports continuous development as well as integration. It is possible to develop serverless application through Azure Function application. When you enroll for Azure training in Hyderabad, you can go through know how to create Azure Function. Ninth one is what are the steps to access data through usage of 80 datasets type in Data Factory. So currently mapping data flow functionally allow Azure SQL Data Warehouse, Azure SQL Database, define text file from Azure Blob Storage or Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, and perquit files from Blob Storage or Data Lake Storage Gen 2 natively or for sync and source. You need to use copy activity to point data from any of supplementary connectors. Subsequently, you need to run a data flow activity to efficiently transform data after it is already staged. 10th point, what do you need? What do you need for executing SSIS package in Data Factory? So you have to create SSIS IR, mean integration runtime, and SSIS DB catalog, which is hosted in Azure SQL Managed Instance or Azure SQL Database. 11th point is what are data sets in ADF? So the dataset is the data that you would use in your pipeline activities in the form of inputs and outputs. Generally, datasets signify the structure of data inside linked data stores like document, files, folders, etc. For instance, an Azure Blob dataset describes the folder and container in Blob storage from which a specific pipeline activity must read data as input for processing. 12th point, what is the use of ADF service? ADF is primarily used to organize the data copying between various relational and non-relational data sources that are being hosted locally in your data centers or in the cloud. Moreover, ADF service can be used for transformation of the ingested data to fulfill your business requirement. So in most of the big data solutions, ADF service is used as an ETL or ETL tool for data ingestion. When you enroll for Azure training, okay, 13 point, how do data mapping flow and wrangling data flow transformation activity differ in Data Factory? So mapping data flow activity is a data transformation activity that is visually designed. It enables you to effectively design graphical data transformation logic in the absence of an expert developer. Moreover, it is operated as an activity inside the ADF pipeline on a fully managed ADF scaled out Spark cluster. On the other hand, Wrangling data flow activity denotes a data preparation activity that doesn't use code. It integrates with Power Query Online to make Power Query M functions accessible for data wrangling through Spark implementation. On the other hand, wrangling data flow activity denotes a data preparation activity that doesn't use code. It integrates with Power Query Online and to make the Power Query M functions accessible for data wrangling through Spark implementation. 14th is what is Azure Databricks? Very important. So Databricks represent an easy, quick, mutual Apache Spark based analytics platform that is optimized for Azure. It is being designed in partnership with founders of Apache Spark. Moreover, Azure Databricks blends the finest of Databricks and Azure to let customers speed up innovation through a quick setup. The smooth workflows and an engaging workspace facilitate teamwork between data engineers, data scientists, and business analysts. So, in Databricks, all these three is data engineer, data scientist, and business analyst can cooperate and work. 15 is what is Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So it's a huge storage of data collected from broad range of sources in a company that is useful to make management decisions. These warehouse enables you to accumulate data from diverse databases existing as either remote or distributed system. In Azure SQL Data Warehouse can be created by integrating data from multiple sources which can be utilized for decision making, analytical reporting, etc. In other words, it's a cloud-based enterprise application that allows you to function under parallel processing to rapidly examine a complex query from a massive data volume. Also, it works as a solution for big data concepts. Then 16 point is what is Azure Data Lake? So Azure Data Lake streamlines processing tasks and data storage for analysts, developers, and data scientists. It is advanced mechanism that supports the mentioned task across multiple platforms and languages. It removes the barriers linked to data storage. Also, it makes it simpler to carry out stream, batch, and interactive analytics. Features in Azure Data Lake resolve the challenges linked with productivity and scalability and fulfill growing business requirement. 17 point is explain the data source in Azure Data Factory. So the data source is the source or destination system that comprises the data intended to be utilized or executed. Types of data can be binary, text, CSV, JSON, etc. It can be image file, video, audio, or might be a proper database. Example of data source include Azure Data Lake Storage, Azure Blob Storage, or any other database such as MySQL Deep Database, Azure SQL Database, Postgres, etc. 18th, why is it beneficial to use Auto Resolve Integration Runtime? So Auto Resolve Integration Runtime automatically try to execute the activities in the same region or in close proximity to the region of the particular sync data source. The same can boost performance. How is lookup activity useful in Azure Data Factory? So in ADF pipeline, the lookup activity is commonly used for configuration lookup purposes. The source dataset is available in it. Moreover, it is used to retrieve the data from source dataset and then send it as an output of the activity. Generally, the output of the lookup activity is further used in the pipeline for taking some decision or presenting any configuration as result. In simple terms, lookup activity is used for data fetching in ADF pipeline. The way you would use it entirely relies on your pipeline logic. It is possible to obtain only the first row or you can retrieve the complete rows depending on your dataset or query. 20 point. What are types of variables in Azure Data Factory? So variables in ADF pipeline allows temporary holding of values. Their usage is similar to just the variables used in programming languages for assigning and manipulating variable values. Two types of activities are used: set variable and append variable. Two types of variable in ADF are system variable, second is user variable. So system variable, these are the fixed variable from Azure pipeline. This Their examples include pipeline ID, pipeline name, trigger name, etc. User variable. User variable are manually declared depending on logic of the pipeline. 21st, explain the link service in Azure Data Factory. Link service represent the connection system used to connect to external source. It functions as a connection string for holding the user validation information. Two types, two ways to create the link service are ARM template way, second using the Azure portal. 22. What does it mean by breakpoint in ADF pipeline? Breakpoint signifies the debug portion of the pipeline. If you wish to check the pipeline with any specific activity, you can accomplish it through the breakpoints. To understand better, for example, you are using three activities in the pipeline and now you want to debug up to second activity only. This can be done by placing the breakpoint at the second activity. To add a breakpoint, you can click the circle present at the top of the activity. 23rd, is Azure Data Factory ETL or ELT tool? So it's a very common question that are sorry frequently asked. So it's a cloud-based Microsoft tool which provides cloud-based integration service for data analytics at scale and supports ETL and ELT paradigm. So both. 24. Why is ADF needed? Very important. With an increasing amount of big data, there is need for service such as ADF that can orchestrate and operationalize processes to refine the enormous stores of raw business data into actionable business insights. So first thing is big data reason. Second thing is refine enormous store of raw business data and convert them into actionable business insight. 25th, what is the purpose of link service in Azure Data Factory? So link service are used majorly for two purposes. For data store representation, any storage system such as Azure Blob storage account, a file share or an Oracle DB SQL Server instance. Second, for compute representation. Underlying VM will execute the activity defined in the pipeline. 26. What is required to execute SSIS package in Azure in Data Factory? So we have to create SSIS integration runtime and add SSIS DB catalog hosted in Azure SQL Server database or Azure SQL Managed instance before executing an SSIS package. 27. How we can deploy code to higher environments in Data Factory. How we can deploy a code to higher environments in Data Factory. So we can do this with the below set of steps. Create a feature branch that will store our code base. Create a pull request to merge the code after we are sure to the dev branch. Publish the code from dev to generate ARM template. So this can trigger an automated CI/CD DevOps pipeline to promote code to higher environments like staging or production. 28. If you want to use the output by executing a query, which activity shall you use? The lookup activity can return the result of executing a query or stored procedure. The output can be singleton value or an array of attributes which can be consumed in subsequent copy activity, data activity, or any transformation or control flow activity, such as for each activity. 29. Can we pass parameter to a pipeline run? The answer is yes, definitely. Parameters are first class, top level concept in Data Factory. You can define parameters at the pipeline level and pass arguments as you execute the pipeline run on demand or using a trigger. Parameters are first class top level concept in Data Factory. 30. Can you elaborate more on Data Factory integration runtime? It is compute infrastructure. It is a compute infrastructure for ADF pipelines. It is nothing but the bridge between activities and link service. It provides a computing environment where the activities run directly or dispatched. This allows the activity to be performed in closest region to the target data source. 31st, what is required to execute SSS package in Data Factory? We have covered it. 32nd, what is the limit of number of integration runtime if any. So within a data factory, the default limit any activity on any entity is set to 5,000, including pipeline, data sets, triggers, link service, private endpoints, and integration runtimes. If required, one can create an online support ticket to raise the limit to a higher number. 33. If you want to use the output by executing a query, which activity? We have covered it. 34. Can a value be calculated for a new column from existing column from mapping in ADF? Yes. You can derive transformation in the mapping data flow to generate a new column based on our desired logic. You can create a new derived column or update an existing one when developing a derived one. Enter the name of the column you are making in the column index box. How to debug an ADF pipeline? So it is one of the crucial aspects of any coding related activity needed to test the code for any issues it might have. It also provides an option to debug the pipeline without executing it. 36. What does it mean by breakpoint in ADF pipeline? To understand better, for example, you are using three activities in pipeline and now you want to debug up to second, we have covered it. 37. What is the use of ADF service? So ADF primarily organizes data copying between relational and non-relational data sources hosted locally in data centers or the cloud. Moreover, you can use ADF service to transform the ingested data to fulfill business requirement. In most big data solution, ADF services use an ETL ELT tool for data ingestion. 38. We have covered it. 39. How to copy multiple tables from one data store to another data store. So maintain a lookup table or file containing the list of tables and their source which need to be copied. Then we can use lookup activity and each loop activity to scan through the list inside the for each loop activity. We can use a copy activity or mapping data flow to copy multiple tables to the destination data store. Can we integrate data factory with machine learning data? Yes, we can train and retain the model on machine learning data from the pipeline and publish it as web service. 41. What is an Azure SQL DB and how can you integrate it with Data Factory? So part of Azure SQL family, Azure SQL Database is the always up-to-date, fully managed relational database service built for cloud for storing data. Using the ADF, we can easily design data pipeline to read and write to SQL DB. 42. Can you host SQL Server instance on Azure? Azure SQL Managed Instance is the intelligent, scalable, and cloud database service that combines the broadest SQL Server instance or SQL Server database engine compatibility with all the benefits of a fully managed and evergreen platform as a service. 43. What is Azure Data Lake Analytics? So it is an on-demand analytics job service that simplifies storing data and processing big data. 44. How do you set up a pipeline that extracts data from a REST API and loads it into Azure SQL database while managing authentication, rate limiting, and potential errors or timeouts during the data retrieval? You can use REST link service to set up authentication and rate limiting settings. To handle errors or timeouts, you can configure a retry policy in the pipeline or and use Azure Function and Azure Logic apps to address any issue during the process. 45. How can one combine or merge several rows into one row in ADF? Can you explain the process? So in ADF, you can merge or combine several rows into a single row using the aggregate transformation. 46. How many times an integration be run through its iteration? So there are no limits placed in any way on amount of integration runtime instance that can exist within a data factory. As you know, we have already covered it. However, there is a limit on the number of virtual machine cores that can be utilized for by the integration runtime for the execution of SSIS packages for each subscription. Then 47. How does the data factory integration runtime actually function? So integration runtime is safe computing platforms make it feasible for data factory to offer data integration capabilities that are portable across various network configuration. This is made possible by use of integration runtime. Because of its proximity to the data center, the work will always, almost certainly be performed there. If you want to learn Azure step by step, you can go online and you can go through the documentation. 48. What prerequisite does Data Factory SSIS execution require? So we have already covered there are SSIS RS and SSIS DB catalogs. What are data sets in ADF framework? So the pipeline activities will make use of input output that are contained in data sets which contain those activities. So a connected data store can be any kind of file, folder, document or anything else imaginable. Data set frequently represent the organization of information within such a store. An Azure Blob dataset, for example, details the blob storage folder and container from which a particular pipeline activity must read data to continue processing. 50. And the last point of this series, what is Azure Databricks? So as you know, data engineers, data scientists and business analysts all can use it as per their requirement. So thank you for watching this videos. Please subscribe the YouTube channel for more videos. We will see you soon. Till then, goodbye.